At this time, I'd like to introduce the speaker of the evening.
Oh, shit.
This gentleman is, we call him Junkyard Jim. Met him a couple years ago. Just happened to walk in here, was checking on his fat father, and he's been making some back and forth trips the last couple years. He hails from out east of about 40 miles east of Bakersfield, California, I believe, and then he makes some guest appearances in Santa Barbara. That's his home group. So without further ado, I welcome Junkyard Jim.
Yeah, great. Oh, all right. Good evening. I am alcoholic, but y'all can call me Jim.
Jim. Hi, Jim.
What an introduction, boy. I don't have to. I can check off a couple of the things on my list right away. Yeah, like Tom said, my home group is a group called the Junkyard Dogs, and it's a men's book study group that meets on Wednesday nights in Santa Barbara, California. And they're called the Junkyard Dogs because Santa Barbara is kind of a ritzy neighborhood. So the only place that would let that group of knuckleheads get together all at the same place, all at the same time, was the local wrecking yard.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because the owner figured he owed him for bringing him so much business during their drinking days, or if he figured, hell, it's a wrecking yard. What are they going to hurt if they start their old habits? But that's where they started. And they've since evolved. They now meet right across from the beach in the Veterans Hall. Just a quick disclaimer. I am not a speaker. These microphones scare the shit out of me. But as my first sponsor told me when I told him that, that's okay, kid. You're full of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's kind of funny because we were talking before the meeting about guys that really are speakers, and we mentioned a couple of them, that being Clancy and a guy named Chuck C. And each of those guys at one time or another was my grand sponsor. Each of them sponsored my longtime sponsor, a guy named Ted Summers. So I did not inherit that gene, though. If you ever do hear of a guy named Darren Phillips, hear of him speaking at a convention or a roundup of any sort, please go listen to him. He indeed is a speaker. He's been invited as far away as Thailand just to come and speak at an AA convention. So he will do you a lot better than I will tonight. Okay, that's that. I'm also here tonight. Sorry, thought I could get through that without choking on it. I'm here tonight to prove that you can stay sober through anything. And why I say that is on Wednesday night, my dad died. And it wasn't totally unexpected. He had been in the ICU at Lutheran General for about a week and a half. But they tried, all kinds of stuff to bring him back from the infection that had developed in his bloodstream. And for 4 or 5 days, he was going downhill instead of, coming back around. So as a family, we decided that the best thing to do was just to keep him as comfortable as possible until the inevitable happened. And it did on Wednesday evening. So I was hoping that this would be somewhat cathartic. And it's funny because the whole time he was the whole time he was in that hospital, I kept hearing that Dan Fogelberg song in my mind about the leader of the band. And it fits because my life has been a poor attempt to imitate that man. Okay. Like I say, I'm a member of the Junkyard Dogs, and they meet in Santa Barbara. And Santa Barbara is kind of a fancy neighborhood, so I've bumped into a few people that, have, shall we say, had the world by the tail as far as outer, trappings go. Had all the money that you could wish for, had all the fame that you could wish for. And yet I met him in AA, and that just proves to me that, everybody's human. And if they take a drink and it happens to them, what happens to me? This is the best place to be. I've met guys that have won Academy Awards. Met guys that have been knighted by the Queen of England. I even met the guy who's personally responsible for the phrase sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And not because he came up with it, but because the people around him came up with it to describe what he was like during his drinking and using days. Yeah, but I've also met, we were also talking about, before the meeting, about the predecessors of AA, an outfit called the Oxford Group. And I even met a guy who got sober with the Oxford Group originally. He went back out, unfortunately, and he didn't make it back for a number of years. He didn't make it back until this thing had become AA. But he made it back on August 1st of 1948, and he stayed sober the rest of his life. And the last time I saw him, he was taking a chip for 72 years of continuous sobriety. And he never would admit, how old he was. And I tried like hell to figure it out, from what I knew about him and all that. But he finally slipped up. The guy that was giving him rides said, yeah, Gardner told me that he's 107 years old. So this thing works. This thing works, if you work it. And he used to tell me that all the time as well. And he gave me a prayer that I hope I will always remember. He said it was a prayer that they used to say back in the old days. And the prayer was, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. And I said that prayer on Wednesday night for my dad. Okay. Anyway, on to sobriety. I was told that, the best thing to do when you're asked to speak is go by, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And at first, what it was like was pretty darn fun, I did some off-the-wall things, but they weren't real bad at first. I can remember one time when my friend and I, Danny, found out that it was snowing about 10 or 12 miles up the road, which is not unusual for you guys here, but in Southern California, to find out it's snowing not far from you was a big deal. So we hopped in my little pickup truck and we ran up the road, and big as life, it was snowing. So we shoveled as much of it as we could into the back of this pickup truck till our hands just couldn't take it anymore, and then we went back to the bar. And each of us smuggled in 2 snowballs, past the bouncers and stuff like that. And we had no idea what we were going to do with them. We just took them into the darkened bar for the hell of it. But as soon as the band started playing that song, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, we knew. Fortunately, we were drunk enough to where all 4 of them missed, and just bounced into the heavy curtain behind the band. But the bouncer still didn't take kindly to that, and we got 86 that night. Thankfully, not forever, just for that night. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. But that was the kind of thing, that was fun at first. And then what happened, shit, I got to put my glasses on to read my notes. Oh, then what happened, things got a little bit more carried away after that. I don't remember how much later, but we were drinking at the same bar. And my drinking had evolved by that time. Okay. And I woke up one morning and, couldn't remember really the night before. I remembered being at Sutter's Mill, the bar, not the place where they discovered gold. But the only thing that I remembered also was having this really strange dream about riding the world's fastest skateboard. wind blowing in your hair and the whole nine yards, just, doing tricks and stuff. And then my friend Eddie, who was the one that was drinking with me that night, came downstairs because I had woken up on somebody's couch and I had no idea. Turned out to be Eddie's couch. And he came down from upstairs and he said, "Do you realize what you did last night?" We've all heard that line, I'm sure. And he continued to tell me of how I went out to the parking lot at closing time. And I had been driving at that time. I had been driving an El Camino when they were really big. And they had, huge, heavy doors. And apparently I had opened the door to get in the car and it slipped out of my hand and it doinked the side of this little Volkswagen Bug next to me. And the girl that owned the Bug was getting in it at the time and just, started coming unglued and stuff like that. And so he said that I started apologizing and trying to make it right with her and all that kind of stuff. And she just didn't want to hear it. She, got in her car and closed the door and fired it up and started to back out of the parking lot. But I wasn't done apologizing. So he said what I did was jump up on the running board, and that just freaked her out all the more. And she took off down Soledad Canyon Road at about 45 or 50 miles an hour with this idiot hanging off the running board of a Volkswagen Bug. Hence the dream of the world's fastest skateboard. And how I kept from getting arrested that night, I have no idea either. But then it even evolved a little bit more, and a number of years later, on Super Bowl Sunday, back when Super Bowl Sunday was about the third week in January, I had gone to a Super Bowl party, and the TV went on the fritz just about the time the game was supposed to come on. So I decided, well, okay, I'm not far from my favorite little beer bar, just over the hill. So I hopped in my little Toyota truck again. Hot-footed over Vasquez Canyon Road, and was just about to turn onto Sierra Highway. I was coming around the last curve of Vasquez Canyon Road by the little trailer park there, and I drifted off into the dirt and lost traction and hit a telephone pole instead. And took down the telephone pole, I found out later. Probably pissed off everybody in that trailer park because it wiped out their electricity right before Super Bowl was coming on. But the windshield broke out, and, flying glass everywhere, and cut the side of my head up pretty bad. They said my ear was just kind of hanging off the side in three pieces that were just kind of sticking together. And apparently there was a Los Angeles County Sheriff going up Sierra Highway who saw the cloud of dust go up when I hit the telephone pole and flipped around and came back to find out what was going on, and took off his shirt and pressed it on the side of my head to keep me from bleeding to death. Now this is just stuff that I was told. I do not remember any of this. I was told this. And I was told that what I was doing while he was trying to save my life was swinging away trying to punch his lights out. So that's kind of what my drinking had evolved into. That one got me my first and only 502, my first and only drunk driving ticket. And that's what brought me to AA. Okay. Because the judge sentenced me to drunk school. I called it drunk school. He called it alcohol diversion program. But, and he gave me the big old fine, and I can understand those two things. But he also sentenced me to 6 A&A meetings. And I thought he was totally out of line with that one. Hell, doesn't everybody, drink a little bit every once in a while and get in a car wreck or two? But I guess he didn't feel that way. And so I came to AA with an empty court card about a week before I was supposed to go back to court. And so I decided that, well, if I had to waste my time with this A&A shit, I was just going to go 6 meetings in a row, get it over with, get 6 signatures and be done with it. And the first meeting I showed up to was a closed meeting where they weren't supposed to sign court cards. But my higher power must have been watching over me. because one of the handful of guys in that meeting was the guy that taught the drunk school that I had been sentenced to. And he knew my attitude from having to deal with me in that 6 weeks or 7 weeks of drunk school. So he came running up, his eyes were about that big around, and he came over and he says, "Now just get you a cup of coffee and sit down and listen." He says, "I'll sign your court card for you, don't worry about it." Tell you the truth, that's all I remember about that first meeting. But then the second meeting started, the second meeting that I decided to attend to. And that was the last meeting on a Saturday night. And we're talking, like Saturday night in January. And I'm having second thoughts about this 6 in a row stuff, because I'm getting thirsty. But then the guy that was chosen to lead that meeting must have been at the first one and caught on to what was going on and copped a resentment over it. Because he started with the normal readings, about this is Alcoholics Anonymous. And then he said something that I'll be always grateful for. He says, this is Alcoholics Anonymous. This is for people who want it, not necessarily people who need it. So if you got a court card and you don't want to be here, just bring it on up here and I'll sign it for you. You can get the hell out of here. And I was reaching for my back pocket for that court card. I was going to take him up on that. And then he said something I will always remember and be forever grateful for. He said, "Matter of fact, you ain't nothing but a liar, a cheat, and a thief. So why don't you just sign it your own damn self and get the hell out of here?" And with that, I had received my first resentment in Alcoholics Anonymous before I even knew what a resentment was. But that locked it in. And right then and there, I decided I was staying for the rest of that meeting. I was going to all 4 meetings that next day, Sunday. And I hoped that weekends were the only chance he had to go to meetings, and he was just going to choke on it every time he saw me. That is not the best way to start your sobriety, but that's what happened to me. Okay. And like I say, I think my higher power was watching over me, because I got a good cross-section of AA. I didn't get to sit in, like 6 speaker meetings where I could just sit there and let it go in one ear and out the other. I got a good cross-section of AA, but I did get 1 speaker meeting. The noon Sunday at the place called the Rafters in Newhall, California, was a speaker meeting. And the speaker that Sunday was Dr. Paul O., the guy who wrote the story about acceptance in the back of the book. So I got to hear him live and in person before I had any inkling of what AA was all about. And I'd love to tell you that I stayed sober from that 6 meetings, but I didn't. But when I went back out there for about the next month or so, you guys had ruined my drinking. It was just not the same. And a month later, on the 16th of February, I came back for me. And I have been here ever since. And that was the 16th of February, 1986. So it's been a couple one day at a times. And it's funny because I always say that, being from Chicago, I was the victim of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre of 1986. Because I never have picked up on that, boy-girl thing. I just never learned the ins and outs of that, because the first couple times I asked a girl out, I got shot down in a big old ball of flame. And that's when I found out that alcohol would at least take the edge off. Trouble with that is, after it takes the edge off, it takes a hold of you and you're off and running. So consequently, I never learned how to deal with rejection or anything like that. And I still struggle with it. But, one more time, my higher power has been watching over me. And just recently even, I told you that my dad was in the hospital and ultimately lost his life. But about a week before he wound up in the hospital, I had just arrived here because I hot-footed it from El Paso, Texas, when I found out that the Chicago Wolves were in the Calder Cup finals for the hockey season. And that Sunday, was the second game of the playoffs. And this friend of mine had signed up to do a service for an older lady that was moving from California to New Hampshire because she could no longer really take care of herself. So she was moving in with her daughter in New Hampshire, who was going to take care of her. But she wanted to keep her car. So Kit, this friend of mine, volunteered to drive Murray's car to her all the way across the country, you know. And I told her when I found out that she was going to do this, I said, well, I'm going to be in Chicago. So if your, route takes you through Chicago, give me a call and I can probably save you, at least one night of a hotel bill. I can talk to my dad and, talk him into letting you sleep at his house. So I did. He agreed. And she showed up at about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, right after I got there. And I told her, well, if you're going to come in on Sunday, you're just in time to go to the second game of the finals, with me and all that. So she arrived at about 11:30, and we took all her stuff out of the car and into my dad's house. And she sat down and she talked with my dad, and they hit it off. I mean, it was amazing. It was the most alive that I had seen my dad in the last 3 years. Because 3 years ago, he had fallen off the porch in the middle of the winter when he slipped and broke a hip and laid out in the yard until the dog walker saw him and called 911. And then a little over a year later, in February or March of 2 years ago, he fell in his own living room and broke the other hip. And that's how I wound up, meeting you guys 2 years ago, was I was here to be his caretaker because they wouldn't let him out of the rehab facility until he had a caretaker. And even though I had a sister, which we will not go into, who lives 7 minutes from him and whose rent he has been paying for over a decade, not that I have a resentment, but she refused to be his caregiver. She said, well, I have a life. I can't do that. And I wanted to choke the living shit out of her. Because the only reason she has a life is because he's paying her bills. Anyway, there you go. See, you can have a little bit of sobriety and still not be all there. But when I saw, Kit and my dad, and they were trading barbs, and just like I say, it was the most animated I've seen him in the last 3 years. And that did my heart good, and especially helped me through the struggles of watching him, fade so fast in the ICU. So that's the part that I choose to remember about my dad, is that Sunday morning and how he reacted with her. And he told me afterwards, after she had left to continue her trip to New Hampshire, he said, if you have even a half a shot with that woman, do not let her get away. And he knows how to pick them, okay? Because he and my mom got together when they were in their early 20s, and they remained married for over 54 years when Mom died. And that's been 20 years ago, and to the best of my knowledge, he hasn't looked at another woman. So, like I say, I hope I have the kind of luck that he had with women. And I've known Kit for ages, seems like. Damn near gave myself whiplash the first time I saw her walk into a meeting. It was like, wow, who in the hell is that? But I just dismissed it as partly as she wouldn't be interested in your dumbass, And besides, look at her. She's young enough to be your daughter, And I used to hate it because I made a living in the motion picture industry. And I hated it when directors and, famous actors would hit on little starlets or, cute extras or something like that, just to see if they could score and prove that they've still got it, So, but fairly recently, I found out she's only about 5.5 years younger than me, not 18 or 20 years younger like I thought. So we'll see. When I get back out to California, I'm going to finally take my dad's advice, or try to. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So that was what it was like and what happened. What it's like now. Like I say, my My home group is the Junkyard Dogs, and they they meet quite a bit of ways from where I was living at the time and where my longtime sponsor Ted lived. It's about an hour and 10 minutes away, but we used to make the trip up to Santa Barbara for the dogs, and then on the way back we would stop at this Starbucks in a suburb of Santa Barbara called Montecito. And you may have heard about that. That's where Oprah has a house and people with the big bucks live. But we stopped there after the Junkyard Dogs. It was about 9:30 at night. And now Ted has a habit of asking newcomers if they've done the third step prayer yet. And usually the answer is no. So when you hear him saying no, you know what to do. You better get down on your knees because you're about to do the third step prayer again, you know. And it takes me a while because I've had bad knees since high school basketball. So we walked into Starbucks, and about two people ahead of us in line is this newcomer that had been at the Junkyard Dogs. And Ted walked up to him and said, hey, congratulations on making it to AA. And have you done the third step prayer yet? And he said, no. And so I started getting down on my knees, and so did the other four guys with us. And we did the third step prayer with this newcomer at about 9:30 at night, about 10 feet inside the door of a Starbucks in the outskirts of Santa Barbara. If you ever want to get some really strange looks, try that one. But you know what? It must have worked, because to the best of my knowledge, everybody in that circle is still sober. And that's been a few years ago now. So that's the kind of thing, that I do now. Unfortunately, Ted passed away a few years ago. And like I say, we were talking before the meeting, and he used to be sponsored by Chuck at one time, Chuck C. And then for the last 25 years, he was sponsored by a guy named Clancy. So I've had some pretty good influences, but I'm real glad that they were filtered through Ted, because I don't think I could have taken Clancy straight up. And this is a guy who used to drink 151 rum in straight shots just to prove how tough he was, but I think I'm just glad Clancy was filtered through Ted Summers. But I've had some really good influences over the years. And I've said before as well that, I don't think I'm too bad in too bad a shape for a guy that's 73 years old. But the exercise that I engage in most often is jumping to conclusions, So I've got a kind of a story about that. And it's about this guy in Texas that has a big old ranch, and he's got a habit of throwing barbecues. So he, would have probably had a 4th of July barbecue to end them all. But as a conversation piece, just off of the patio where he holds these barbecues, he dug himself an alligator pond, right? And he stocked it with the meanest alligators he could find, and he deliberately didn't feed them too well, just to keep them good in an ornery, right? So one of these barbecues, all these good old boys are standing around and telling, can you top this type of stories, how tough they are and all that kind of stuff. And this guy, kept listening and listening. He finally couldn't take it anymore. He says, I'll tell you what, guys. He says, anybody can swim across that alligator pond. I'll give him a check for $1 million. I'll give him a ranch like this one, or I'll give him my daughter's hand in marriage. You pick. And he turned around, figuring that'll put an end to this bullshit. And he had no sooner turned around when he heard a big old splash. And here's this guy swimming across the alligator pond, right? And I mean, he is cooking. He's like a speedboat leaving a rooster tail behind him. And he made it. He made it all the way across the alligator pond, And people were going over to the other side and wrapping him in towels and blankets and all that kind of stuff and congratulating him and stuff like that. So the Texan walked over and he says, I'm a man of my word. He says, let me get my checkbook. I'll write you that $1 million check. And the guy from under all these blankets and towels said, no, no, my daddy just passed away and he left me more money than I could ever spend. And he said, well, then it must be, that you want a ranch like this one. And the guy under the blanket said, no, sir. He says, another part of what my daddy left me was a ranch even bigger than this one. No offense. And so he said, well, then it's got to be my daughter's hand in marriage. And from out of this pile of blankets come the left hand, and there's a wedding ring on the ring finger. He says, no, sir. He says, I'm already married. And this really puzzled the host. And he says, well, what do you want then? And the guy from under the blanket said, I just want the name of the son of a bitch that pushed me in that pond. So I've been known to jump to a conclusion or two myself. And, I told you about my longtime sponsor, Ted. And he ended his pitch. He was asked to speak at various functions as well, but even when he would just share at a meeting, he would always end it with the same thing. He would say, you know what? I don't ever, EVER, ever want to have to sober up again. And the whole room, once you knew Ted, you would spell ever with him the whole time. The whole room would spell it as he spelled it. And he says, because it's a whole lot easier to stay sober than it is to get sober all over again. And if you don't believe it, ask one of these people that has had to try to do it. And you know what? I've so far taken that to heart. And I haven't had to go back out there. Because a bunch of people with a lot more courage than me have gone back out there, but they've come back to tell me that Ted's right. Ted's right. It's easier to stay sober than it is to get sober all over again. And that's about all I have to say. Like I say, I'm not exactly a speaker, and I don't know how long I was supposed to speak, but that's about it. But I'd like to do a little bit of something that I did the other night at a meeting. Out there, we close meetings right before we hold hands and do the prayer. We close meetings with either reading the Keys of the King or with either reading something that was read. What'd you got?
More about alcoholism?
Huh?
More about alcoholism?
No.
Would you read the other?
The promises.
Oh, promise.
They read either the promises or that portion of A Vision for You. But I've taken to doing a little bit of something different, and it's actually the last 3 paragraphs of a story in the back of the book. And those 3 paragraphs are on page 276, if anybody's interested. But they go something like this. The last 15 years of my life have been rich and meaningful. I've had my share of problems, heartaches, and disappointments because that is life. But also I've known a great deal of joy and a peace that is the handmaiden of an inner freedom. I have a wealth of friends, and with my AA friends, an unusual quality of fellowship. For to these people I am truly related. First through mutual pain and despair, and later through mutual objectives and newfound faith and hope. And as the years go by, working together, sharing our experiences with one another, and also sharing a mutual trust, understanding, and love, without strings, without obligation, we acquire relationships that are unique and priceless. There is no more aloneness. With that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it, that ache is gone and never need return again. Now there's a sense of belonging, of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for a bottle and a hangover, we've been given the keys of the kingdom. Thanks.
Now it's customary to open the floor to any comments for Jim.
Oh, shit.
You're all right.
I'm not off the hook yet?
You're okay.
You stay in the building.
You're okay. You're okay.
Good evening. My name is Greg. I'm an addict and alcoholic.
Hey, Greg.
Sorry to voluntold you to speak tonight. Great to hear a couple of new stories. Yeah, my condolences on your father, and a lot of courage to get up there and speak after that big event that you just went through. And you're right, you know, there's nothing that a drink won't make worse. It's not gonna bring your dad back.
Nope.
You know, he had a good long life, 95 years. So, just so glad that got the opportunity to meet you, and you know, I don't think there's any coincidences in life. You know, God brought you back here for this silly thing about moving some furniture and some things for your nephew and your brother and stuff, and you just happened to be here to be with your dad in those last week and a half.
Yeah.
That's a blessing, you know. And you said many times up there that, you know, God was watching over you, and,
Yeah.
and I believe that He's watching over each and every one of us. So, thank you. Thanks for getting up there and having the courage to speak.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
My name's Anthony. I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah, Anthony.
Jim, thanks. I was sharing some meetings with you in the morning time, I guess 2 years ago now. I think about it, and I remember talking about your dad. And, you know, what you did for me tonight was you reminded me, I say this all the time, I got sober in Florida with the guys with a lot of time. You know, a lot of time. And you're that, I'm sure, I'm making an assumption. I'm jumping to conclusions here. And you are that old timer for somebody. Like, I just kind of assume that. And, it's amazing to me, you know, it's not amazing to me. It happens too often that just you're here. You know, we had a blank spot. Tom had a blank spot here. And I heard somebody say, and I said, well, say it really quick, God will fill it. God will fill it. You know what I mean? And like 3 days after your father passed away, you're at an AA meeting speaking, and we had a spot open. You know, is it odd or is it God? You know, I get to make that choice today. And thanks for sharing that Keys to the Kingdom. There's an old timer that always would share that, actually. And yeah, so that's. Anyways, thank you very much, man. I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Anthony.
Yes, Bob.
Bob, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Bob.
It's good to be with you. Thanks, Jim, for sharing your message. You know, I've enjoyed your friendship, you know, the last couple of years. And, you know, a week ago Thursday, you know, I've seen you at a lot of meetings. We're in the same home group on Thursday. We get to know each other. And, you know, a week ago Thursday, man, we sat out in Jack's backyard for a half hour before that thing started. And, you know, your honesty and your just realness. You're going to be missed. You know, it's like I thought, man, this guy fits in around here. You know, it's like, you know, I have a lot of acquaintances, but I don't have a lot of friends. You know, and I can relate to you. I went through what you're going through 18 years ago with my dad. And, you know, that night, you know, before going to church and saying the eulogy, man, what a night, you know. But I felt the same way about my dad. I had a lot of respect for him. He did a lot of good things. I never met your dad, but boy, meeting you, I'm sure he was a hell of a guy. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Anyone else? And same to their point, Jim, it's been a pleasure. You sharing the meetings with us on the Thursday nights when you come back into town, and the 6:30 Saturday morning meetings here as well. You've got some good inside stories and quite entertaining. Thank you for stepping up tonight and sharing your story of experience, strength, and hope. So now what we do is that we circle together and hold hands and going out with the prayer of your choice. Thanks, everybody. See you next Saturday.
Thanks, man.